Hello, and welcome to another episode of Creating Cultures that Outperform. I'm Frank Warner. I'm the founder and CEO of People Productive, and I'm here with my amazing co-host, Terry Mays, who is a certified culture engineer. I hope you've been following this series on innovative culture. We're on episode 9 today. We're covering all the human factors that really drive innovation. Today, we're going to be going over interruption-free time. It's more closely tied to productivity in the workplace, but it's very important if you have an organization that's focused on innovation in a certain area that people have interruption-free time to work on it, to dig in, to focus. That's what matters. And companies struggle with interruption-free time, actually. And I'll just share this one study here very quickly. It's the authoritative one. We've referenced this many times, in our company and on these shows, but this is actually a study from 2005 where over an 18-month period, they tracked executives, individuals, knowledge workers, senior executives, end users. And what they found was that 28% of the average knowledge worker's day, based on this surveys and interviews, was filled with interruptions. And so that translates into 28 billion lost man hours. At that time, 21 an hour, they said the cost of the U.S. economy was 588 billion. So it's called attention management, really, which is about your ability to really focus on the things that you're working on. This is a plague in companies. And I think, quite honestly, since then, it's gotten worse than ever. Don't you, Tara?
I agree 100%. If we just think about how many more devices we have since 2005, you've got a cell phone, you've got your computer, you've got an iPad or, some Google device, you've got people coming in and out of your office.
You got all the messaging solutions that people are on.
Yeah, you've got all the apps with all the notifications. If you've got any kind of social media notifications, they're constant.
It's nuts. It is. I turn them off.
Absolutely ridiculous. You've got the email notifications that are coming in. So when they did this study, we didn't have nearly as many apps, nearly as many things that can ding at us during a day. So I can only imagine what that cost translates to in today's numbers. It's probably astronomical.
It's astronomical. And everybody, you can actually look that study up. It's by an organization called BaseX at that time. And it's the most authoritative study, I think, on the cost of interruptions. But if you're in an environment where you're interrupted constantly, here's the problem. You really never get to think or dig into anything. Humans can't multitask. That's the nature of the way our brain is wired. We have a very small amount of conscious memory. It runs at about 60 bits a second. Subconscious is 10 billion bits a second, from at least one person who studied this deeply. And you really make very little progress because after you're interrupted, it takes 23 minutes on average to get back into a state of flow. Flow is where you're the most productive, probably 5 times as productive as somebody not in a state of flow. So you really never get to dig into anything. It's hard to consume material. It's hard to get work done. And interruptions is a plague. I'll be honest.
It is. It's a total distraction. So if you think about the time that it takes you to get your brain back focused after the interruption, it's a nightmare. So you've been deep in thought about something, and then your phone goes off, you get a phone call, you get an email, you get a meeting notification. All of those things take your attention. And so you stop thinking about what you were thinking about and you focus in on something else. It's really a misnomer that the human brain or that we can multitask. We cannot. We literally stop thinking about one thing so we think about something else. And we may do that throughout the day and switch those different tasks from one thing to the next. And so people call that multitasking, but really it's single-threaded thinking. You really can only think about one thing at a time. You cannot think about 2 things at once. So a number of times that you do that throughout the day, it really decreases the amount of productivity you have, because now you're not able to have that continuous conscious thought about whatever it is that you're working on, because you're dividing your time. And we've all been in meetings before where someone is presenting information and somebody that needs to hear that information, they're engaged for a minute and then they look down at their phone and then they're engaged for a minute, and then they look at the computer. And so all those times when they're changing their focus, they're not paying attention to the person that's presenting. So when the question comes up, they're looking like a deer in the headlights because they have not heard a single thing.
Oh
Well, that's
God, yeah,
because
that's
we
exactly what
cannot
happens.
multitask. Yeah, you can't multitask. You really do have to focus in and be present in the room, in the moment when things are happening, so that you can actually participate in the discussion when it needs to happen and make the right choices when they need to be made. So, as a leader, you want to make sure that you're not giving people divided time, because it really does not work. It really doesn't. You end up having to have the same discussions over and over and over again because you're distracted, or the people that are in the room are distracted. So you want to make sure that you dedicate that time to work on specific tasks. If the meeting has been called for a specific purpose to actually get to a decision, then you want to focus your effort and your energy on being uninterrupted for 30 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever the time frame is. Dedicate that time, because it'll really make a difference in the productivity of the organization.
Yeah, and in terms of innovation, remember, we could have called this research time. You need focus time to dig into the subject area that you're working on. Everybody working on innovation in a particular area, and we've gone through the whole strategy and planning piece, how you break down what the overarching strategy is or goal of the organization, turn it into plans that are meaningful and motivate people. Well, you've got to have research time for these folks to do work, and that is the interruption-free time that they can use to dig into this subject area. Without it, they're not going to make progress. You're not going to have all of that input, all of that background information, because creativity is putting things together. You take different points of view, put them together. That's why we covered creative abrasion. And hopefully you tune into that episode. But it's super important that people have that interruption-free time to dig in and do the research they need to do in the subject area they're working on. It's just super important. They're not going to be as able to contribute in the way they could. And in the next episode, we're actually going to cover think time, which is where some of the magic really takes place. So you're packing information, into the people that are involved in innovation so that think time can come into play. And that's very important.
Yes, so important.
Yeah.
It matters, right? So you don't want to waste a bunch of time with all of these different distractions. You don't want to waste money. You don't want to waste time. And those are, just having people constantly bombarded with distractions. I even think about when you're in a meeting
Yeah.
and you get a bunch of chat messages on Teams. That's a distraction.
Oh, totally.
Sometimes those messages come in and you're tempted to look at it right away. But you want to develop a culture where when you're in a meeting, you're in the meeting. You're
Attend the
actually
meeting. Yeah,
participating.
fully.
You're fully in the meeting. When you're in those working sessions where everybody is trying to come together and you've got creative abrasion going on, be in the working session. Like
Yeah.
wherever your calendar has allotted time for you to be, actually be there, because it'll start to make such a difference in the overall feeling that you have throughout the day. So not to mention, we haven't even tackled the whole side of this interruption free time that deals with the stress of having all these different interruptions, all of these different notifications
Yeah.
going off at all these different times. The level of stress that induces when you feel like it's urgent. I have to
Yeah.
respond right this minute. I got this text message, or I got this chat message in Teams. I must respond immediately. Or I got an email. I must respond immediately. There's a level of anxiety and stress that comes with that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you
And we
want
know
to make sure.
cortisol makes people very edgy. When
Yes.
people are very edgy, they're less able to focus. There's less clarity around what they're doing. So you're taking another big hit to productivity because of the interruptions, no question. And
Yeah.
it's
You
going
want to
to limit your innovation potential.
Exactly. You want to make sure you're not, as a leader, creating that anxiousness, that anxiety for people by sending them messages during meetings and expecting them to respond. There's nothing worse than when you're presenting in a meeting and you start getting a bunch of instant notifications.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
then
it's
you're
horrible.
trying to stop presenting so you can see what the person is saying and see, what kind of questions are being asked of you or what's required of you. Is it something related to the meeting? And a lot of times it's not.
Yeah,
So
I turn notifications off for the
yeah,
most part, to be honest with you. They're so annoying. Look,
yeah,
interruption, controlling interruptions is a key competitive advantage for an organization. You're going to be far more productive. It's going to create room for innovation in the organization. It really, really matters. And, there are other people who have looked into this. Deming, who, of course, is incredibly famous, one of his quotes was the average American worker has 50 interruptions a day, of which 70% have nothing to do with work. I think that's true. Gloria Mark, who was an associate professor at Donald Brent School of Information and Computer Science, they studied it, and here's what she said. What we found is that the average amount of time that people spent on any single event before being interrupted or before switching was about 3 minutes. Actually, 3 minutes and 5 seconds on average. I mean, that's just so unproductive. You're not going to create an innovative culture that way. You're just not. You're going to have people just task switching, moving from thing to thing. Organizations must begin to control interruptions. They need a workplace where people can not only be productive, they can be innovative, they have the time to do their work. You got to make room for this stuff to happen. So it's super important. And I think you should join us for the next episode. We're going to be covering Think Time. We're here every Wednesday at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. There's another episode. We have an incredible library of shows, probably close to 200 at this point, on the People Productive channel. I think you should subscribe to that on YouTube. It's phenomenal. We have just a wealth of information on the human factors of leadership and productivity. This is just one, and it's a series, which we have. I think there'll be 15, 16 episodes in this by the time we're done. So, look, try to join us next week. Think Time.